You down with SOP? Yeah, you know me. Standard operating procedures. That's what keeps your business running on a day-to-day. And today we're going to talk about them. Stick around to the end. We'll give you tips and tricks that you can use right now to start implementing. Hi, welcome to Blunt Force Business. I'm Brian LaFauci.
And I'm Patrick Marino.
And today we're going to dig into standard operating procedures for your business to maximize your growth. So let's jump right in like we always do. So our blunt force facts, we have 3 blunt force facts for you as always. Blunt force fact number 1 for implementing standard operating procedures in your business is a few minutes can save hundreds of hours.
If you're like me, you don't love creating systems. You love just doing the work. Well, you can save yourself a ton of time by just spending a little bit of time on the systems and defining things and giving yourself a little bit of consistency.
Awesome. Blunt force fact number 2 we're going to talk to you about today is flying blind leads to crashes.
A lot of the mistakes that you make as a small business, especially as you try and grow, they're avoidable. Right. And a lot of the mistakes are avoidable because you've already done a lot of the things that you make mistakes with. You maybe don't do them frequently. And so as you have the process, it just saves yourself a lot of aggravation.
Awesome. And blunt force fact number 3 today is systems are sustainability and sustainability are systems.
I think the ultimate value we're trying to give everybody here today is this concept of you want to have growth that's sustainable, that's consistent, and that you can continue to build on. And that really comes from consistency, right? And having these systems in place. And the two of them work together very, very well.
And if our listeners stick with us into the video, we're going to go into some great ways that you can start implementing that now. So let's first, with operationally, we're going to be very systematic today in our conversation. So let's.
Brian's the big checklist person. I'm the fly by the seat of my pants.
I had a checklist for my checklist today. Did I have my checklist? Yes.
Well, it's funny because we do not have. We've been doing now. I think we're getting close to 50. I don't know how many episodes we've done across all of the different various videos we do. Mm-hmm. But at the beginning, we come in, we set up our cameras, there's lighting things, and we're learning some of it, right? You've improved the lighting in the room, right? To suit our prima donna, Brian LaFauci, right?
Well, I got really tired of the reflective glow on my head that no amount of makeup could fix.
I have a little bit of glow too. Yeah. But the challenge is that we're still, we're professionals as business consultants. We're not professionals at creating videos, right? And so we're trying to get better. And one of the things that we do is we use iPhones for our shooting right now. We tried kind of a higher level camera last week or whatever it was, a couple weeks ago. And we did not set it. I should say there's settings in these cameras that make it very difficult to edit. And we know what they are. And we should probably just have like a little checklist, right? So what's happening right now is like we come in and I'm like, oh, Brian, did you remember to do that? And you're like, oh, do you remember to do that? And it's like, maybe we should just have our little checklist, right? Where it's like, check this, make sure there's enough storage in the camera we're using. Yeah. So if we had a standard operating procedure, it would save us hours because what happens? I'm usually editing at night. And then I'm like, guys, note to self. I can't edit this shit because it's in the wrong format. It's going to take me way longer to upload and whatever it is. So just a clear example of why SOPs could help us.
Absolutely. And we'd like to thank ourselves for helping ourselves today. So that's the end of the video. We got out of the video what we clearly needed.
Exactly. We need to hold ourselves accountable.
Yeah, was a standard operating procedure for us for this video shoot today. And it's funny because I like that in everything, but then when there's things like this, so I'm like, all right, we don't have it for this. And for some reason, certain things, it's easier than others for them to kind of just morph and evolve and then become. But when you think back to your point is, and our listeners, as they're developing their business idea and concept and growing it, where they are now has kind of just morphed into what it is in a lot of cases. And the systems behind that they're only here.
Right.
And where we see struggle with growth to go from that small company with like 1 or 2 people to then 10 is now all of a sudden it's how do I ensure that quality doesn't get lost, or that, you know, that person knows what I have here? And like, I agree with you that yes, next week there will be a checklist on that thing without a doubt. But what's happened is we've gotten into this pattern, right? But in that pattern, there has been flaws. And the only reason those flaws existed, the only reason there was, hey, that didn't come out the way it should have, was exactly what you said. Yeah. If we had just, as we had developed, just updated our SOPs, put it down with the checklist. About
just had SOPs.
Right. Well, everyone has them, by the way.
Yeah.
You all have them. Yeah, they're here. And normally they're just rote memorization or like patterns of behavior that we develop that we don't even realize.
Right. One of the, you talked about, so it's in your head. It's the pattern of behavior. It's things that you've already learned, but it's in your head as the owner and the entrepreneur. And this is really, we talked a lot about sustainable growth. And what's the challenge? The challenge is, okay, when it gets to the point where you are not doing it anymore, is the biggest thing, right? Where it's like, okay, the procedure that you've developed is something you're not doing anymore. And I worked in a fast growing supplement company.
Yep.
For the last couple of years as a consultant, contractor. And there was a lot of things that came up over the course of my only couple of years there, where it was like the owner, the entrepreneur, the person who started the company was like, oh, we already know that.
Yeah.
Mistakes will have been made.
Right.
Right. And it's like, oh, we made that mistake. And it's like, oh, we did that. We know that because when I did this myself, I made the same mistake.
Right.
Right. And so that could have been communicated.
Yeah.
Right. That's where an SOP comes into place. It's like,
absolutely.
Okay, here's the steps to performing this task.
Yeah.
Don't skip this part because this is the part. And a lot of times it becomes, how do you bring in new people? Because then I would bring in new people, right? And they'd be, okay, what are we going to do? And I knew ahead of time what the mistakes were going to be. But I'm not doing it off the top of my head like we did, right? I'm doing it because now because we've made the mistake so many times, we developed the checklist. Right, here's the standard operating procedure for this particular process. And now I can walk them through it and say, okay, here's why we do this. Here's why we do that. Here's why we do that. Right. Without that written out, right, that written part is so important that it's documented.
I think a good way our listeners can relate to this and that everyone can relate to this is think about something that you say over and over again, whether it be to your kids, your staff, right? Doesn't matter, right? This is just a good way to like identify it and be able to be like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about now. Okay. We think about that thing. So, we all can do that. We all can think. And why is it we're repeating that? Well, because we don't have a system in place to be confident that that thing's going to happen. I mean, it's simple as that. So when we start the video, before we start, I bet you get this right. And if you don't, it's okay. What do I say to Shannon every time before we start going? There are a couple questions I ask her every time.
You ask to make sure the audio is running? Is that one of them?
Yep.
All right.
See, I knew you'd know it.
Okay. And then you make sure, like, is there glare on my forehead from the
from the we lighting? Do that. Yep.
Do I have any more hair?
Yep. And then what else?
And then you take care of the dog. It's like, is the dog okay? Does the dog have peanut butter?
We always make sure the dog's okay.
What else? Is the camera running? Is the camera running? And is the audio running?
So those are standard operating procedures that lie in my head as self-checks, that the reality is and I'm not saying that there'd be a mistake, but if there was a checklist, I wouldn't be needed. So if I'm sick one day and you're here and I'm the one who maybe usually says that, not saying you don't, but just in a hypothetical world, then I can be sick, you can be here with a guest, and that's still going to happen. Right? Whereas now, it's a
I'd probably get halfway into it, be like, oh crap, we don't have any audio.
No, but you know what I mean? Like
the microphones, where are they?
Right.
We've been talking for a half hour. We don't
Think
have
about
microphones.
Think about another one that we do. The other one that we do is how many times, and this happens all the time, and then we kind of adjust, how many times have we not started our timer so we're tracking on our video length?
Yeah, we don't do that very often anymore, but it's still in our head.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's an in our head process, right? The checklist would remove that.
Right.
So I mean,
it's
we're letting everyone into the back end of how fucking fly by the seat of the pants we are.
Where are you in your business journey, right? So we're still in the very early growth phase, right? Because this part of the business, this creating the video content, is not our forte, right? We've been doing things.
Oh, it's less than a year.
Yeah, we've been doing things for years and years and years, and now here we are doing this, and we're still new to it. It's still a very small part of what we do for a living.
Right.
It's this tiny little piece that we hope will grow. So we're making mistakes and we're learning and we're starting to develop some of these processes ourselves, and that's where it comes in the growth. The other area where it comes in growth is just, I think you kind of hinted at it with the idea that you weren't here. It's not just training somebody else, but it's also just having that consistency. One of the things you referenced a lot when we started talking, because we talked a lot about processes, I think it's important to you, but you would talk about two companies a lot, all really good for us and healthy: Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's.
Yeah.
This idea that this remarkable ability, like, my boy and I were in Hawaii last month, right? And it's like, he was hoping that the McDonald's might be a little different. I think there was probably a time where the McDonald's in Hawaii was a little different.
Did that really come up? Did he say he's hoping that it was different?
Yeah, and it wasn't. It was exactly the same.
Wasn't a Royale with cheese?
No, that's not Hawaii. Hawaiians don't speak French. But in any event, that's pretty. It's pretty remarkable if you can walk into a McDonald's and it's almost going to taste exactly the same. Like everything is exactly the same. You can argue whether or not that's a good thing, but these bigger franchises where you just see this remarkable consistency, it comes from SOPs. This is not an accident. It's a plan, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can boil this down to the fact that this is about us taking the time to do a couple things. It's taking the time to, when we find a problem, when we start doing something, making it sustainable through putting it down, and everything comes down to getting it on paper or in digital form somewhere. That's what we're talking about today. We're getting stuff out of the head of whoever owns it, and we're getting it into a process either digitally or on paper. So that can be obviously we're more than likely not going to write this on a scratch piece of paper and put it on the wall. This is going to have a digital presence.
Even though you are a pen and paper type of guy.
But then I translate, right? Yep. I translate too. There's a really great resource out there that I'd like our listeners to be aware of. We tell you to stick with it. But there's some great AI tools that you can add as plugins. I think the one we use is called Capture or Captive. It's one of the two. If you Google it, it'll bring it close enough. And it's a plugin, and it adds into your browser. And so much of the stuff we do is clicking through and creating a system, right? So what this does is you activate it, you give it a name, and once you give it a name, you then go through the process, right? So you hit the button, you do the thing, and then you go through the process. And as I'm clicking through the steps, it's automatically creating like a system. And it's all right, screenshot. So all I'm doing is the work I would normally doing, and it's making this really awesome training tool. This for me, then all you gotta do is hit save, give it a name, and boom, and it's off. And I found this to be really helpful, like with our interns, when we post stuff on social media and I want them to post it the same way, or on like YouTube and I want them to post it the same way, I have the screenshots already built just by doing the process and having it recorded. So there's tools like that. Highly recommend you use them. Some of them are free. Some maybe cost like a couple bucks a month. But if you're developing training tools, I think they're fantastic. We use Airgram. Airgram's another AI tool that I love for developing like a training, in that it can record your screen. Same thing. It records like Zoom meetings, but anything you want to get, you want to use it to like get down and have a system that you can give off. They're great. AI is a great resource for like recording stuff and making trainable tools.
Yes, for sure. I mean, anything you can video. We'll get into implementation in a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure. Anything else you wanted to, I mean, I know one of the things, other things I wanted to talk about as well, why these SOPs are important. I think it'd be really important if you're in an industry where you're threatened by some sort of regulation, right? Whether that be a government. We had Mr.
Abreu.
We had Councilor Abreu in, right, to talk about government regulations and local city regulations and things like that. And like, if you have a business that has to deal with those things on a frequent basis, you really ought to have those processes documented. because if it's so important to the existence. I mean, even in the, this is not a local issue, but in the supplement industry,
Yep.
there was a lot of internal knowledge in the company. I'm coming in as a marketing contractor, right? There's a lot of internal knowledge in the company from being in the supplement business for over 5 years. I think it was closer to 8, where they knew that there was some things they couldn't say, right? We can't say this will detox you or whatever it is. Like, we can't say you'll lose weight if you take this, right? Because these are claims, right? And all of a sudden now you're flagged and now you're running afoul. But they were all kind of in the heads of the people, right? If you go on meetings, like, don't we have like a list of things? Well, yeah.
Right.
Well, maybe we should just have a list of things. Like, here's the actual things.
Right.
Here's the things we can't say.
Right.
Right. But it's institutional knowledge that needs to be documented, right? And that goes for, again, like the regulations, local regulation. You're working with a city or town, you've got a permitting process. I mean, just use the word process like that. Whatever that process is, you should know what it is, and it needs to be written down. Because if it's core to the success of your business, the growth is dependent on the fact that you're doing things legally and appropriately and you're not getting shut down.
Yep.
Better have that shit down, right?
Yep.
It's like checklist going into a bathroom, for the people who work at the checklist in the kitchen.
Wash your
restaurant.
hands, that kind of stuff.
Checklists in the kitchen in restaurants, they don't get shut down by the Board of Health, right? It's like all these things there. These are all SOPs, and you might not run a restaurant, but if you have something that requires regulation.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, those are cases where it's really important. And I find like those get done more regularly than not because you feel there's like consequence.
Yeah.
But the ones that have consequence to growth ability and where like people struggle to like, and they end up, what do they end up doing? You'll end up micromanaging your people. That's what you'll end up doing. And if you find you're micromanaging your people, I guarantee you it's because the way you're training them is wrong. And your process of creating like standard operating procedures for them is broke.
There's something to that too. I feel like that's actually a really good point, because I know that it's easier to give them a checklist and say, okay, you do it. Because then it's kind of in their hands.
Yeah.
Versus you telling them over and over again, hey, don't make this mistake. Don't make that mistake. Like, here's a mistake you made. Like, but if it's in their hands and they don't feel like you're hovering, I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah, it does
like
too. One, it create. So the reason I like standard operating procedures so much, and even though we don't have one even though we haven't yet had one for this podcast,
there's none for blunt force business.
There will be one next
strategy.
There will be one next week, is because as much as it seems controlling, it actually does the other thing, and it allows employee autonomy, because now I've already told you what exactly is required to make sure this thing happens. The rest is up to you.
Yeah.
Do what you want with it. Have fun with it and make it yours. Because once I've created this is what I care about, the rest is your process.
We use the music example all the time, right? The guitar solo doesn't work if it's completely divorced from the rest of the song. Like, Absolutely. It has to work with the chord structure, the key, right? It has to be in key, right? It only works if it works within the structure of the song, right? So we have, but that means we have to write the song first before we have the solo, right? You can't do the solo without the song.
I think the SOPs create the melody.
We can't have a triumphant video until we have Eddie Van Halen.
They create the melody, and it allows your employees to create the riffs.
Let's talk
riffs and melodies.
Let's talk implementation, right? As usual, this is one of Brian's SOPs. This is demands we have a worksheet. So we have a worksheet. Make sure you scroll to the end of our description. Well, the downloadable worksheet for you on developing and implementing SOPs in your business. But let's go through some of the implementation steps.
Okay, awesome. So the first thing is you have to go through that process, like we talked about, of developing very clear step-by-step instructions. Like, what is the purpose of this process? And that's a key piece to this. If you're going to put something on paper, and we always talk about what should be at the top of that paper, your mission and vision, always, right? Always use this as an opportunity to remind people about why you're here. And then the second thing is what we go into is purpose. Because giving someone a series of instructions is good, but what's gooder is giving them a series of instructions where they know what the intent is. Because then when they do their riff on it, it's with the understanding of, all right, I know what the goal of this is, right? I know what the purpose and goal is. You want to include some stuff about like scope, like where does this apply? When do we implement it? Like this is for when you're doing this specific thing. You want to pull this out, right? Clearly identifying responsibilities. Right? These are
who's doing it?
Yep. Who is it? Which is another key piece. Like who's in charge of this? We had a pretty good standard operating procedure for building operations at our sport complex. And it was a weekly checklist broken down by day. And there were, certain days where things were done, other days they weren't done. Some things had to be done every day. But it was pretty laid out in knowing who was doing it. Because if you were the first person in the building, that block was identified. Like, first person in on shift, this is what you do, right? Last person out the door, this is what you do. And in between, staff head, right? So you who's doing it? And then the procedure itself. And I think the key thing about the procedure is don't hesitate and don't be afraid to really identify what are the key pieces of this that are a must for you. You're going to leave autonomy in there for the person doing it. But an example of that is you might always know that you will, you want a specific task. You do a specific task in a certain way because you like it that way. Well, that needs to be clearly communicated, right? So break that task down. If I say to you right now, hey, listen, go record that video. The ambiguity, if that's the SOP is record the video, the SOP actually should be get the iPhone 12 that we have, okay?
The gray one with the Liverpool case.
Put the setting on A, B, C, or D. Use this lighting. Capture the thing with the background. Like, that's the stuff. So when we create the SOP, the McDonald's SOP says we're going to take this amount, this many ounces of burger meat.
Right.
At this temperature.
They all have, you can see them at Dunkin' Donuts. So they create the dispenser, like it dispenses the right amount.
Right.
Here's the right amount of sugar, the right amount of cream. It all comes out, boom, it's right there. There's no questions, right? It's all done. The other thing, the other example, I'm going to freaking screw. Oh no, I was thinking about, we just had the big game. The big game was just on Sunday, right? One of the big debates is always, what is a catch? Right? What's a catch? No one knows what the catch is anymore. It's like, does he have control of the ball? It goes to the ground, or what? At what point does he create a football move? But all those things are taking the judgment out and making it a standard operating procedure for the referees, so that they don't have to use their judgment. Because once you start if you insert too much judgment into the equation, now you have inconsistency. Right? The more you can take the judgment out and sort of just give them, here are the actual rules. Yep. The more likely you have that consistency. And now you've got fairness in that case, right? In our case, we're going for sustainable growth. So we know that we have control over this. Yeah. If we put in all these rules into place, we know if all these things get done, then we're good. And if you forget one of them, you have to add it in. And if something gets done wrong, it's your fault. It's not the person doing it's fault. You got to keep that in mind. So, hey, they do the thing and something that happens is outside of the scope of what you defined. Well, okay. Well, then you need to redefine and improve on what it is you gave them for the instructions. So this is a process of reviewing, and most importantly, and this is why people don't do this, it's a process of training. Sitting people down, going over it, having discussion, having them ask questions, getting feedback. And why don't we do that? Well, because it takes time. So what's easier? Oh, I'll just do it. Right. I'll just do it. Just get it, get it done. Do it. That is not a way where it's even at all possible for you to grow. I'm definitely guilty of that. You cannot grow. I'm usually like a big part of my internal philosophy which I need to break is that if it takes me more time to tell someone how to do it, then it takes me to do it, then I'm always going to just do it. Right. That's not sustainable. Right. Not even close. Yeah. So so we're getting to the point of implementation now. Like, how do we implement these SOPs that we've created? Train, right? So develop the procedures, train your people on them, and make sure there's time for review, rinse, wash, repeat, review,
right? Is the thing we say all the time. Make sure there's time for review in there, because things are going to evolve, and what you had set up for an operating procedure year 1 won't be the same year 3.
Or things are unexpected, especially since, like I said, we've been in this high growth period, right? And we didn't know about the setting on the camera, right? When we decided to go 4K, we were like, oh, we didn't know that there was going to be an issue. You know what I mean? And then we figured it out. So we had to figure it out. The other thing, which you mentioned, recording it helps, right? And,
absolutely.
But I think that the old way would have been, you had paper checklists, right?
Yes.
And in certain environments, especially if you're in more of like an environment where everybody's kind of at a workstation or has a PC or a laptop or whatever it is, or they're remote, even better when they're remote, is you need to have some sort of central repository for all of these SOPs. Like, you know, the probably an easy one is a Google Drive. You know, have an accessible Google Drive, put a folder in it that says SOPs, and in there, all your documents and videos that you've recorded of processes.
Right.
And they need to be, you know, there needs to be kind of, you know, SEO, right? Keywords, right? It's like, here's the SOP for recording the video. Here's the SOP for sending the email.
Yep.
Here's the SOP for creating the campaign. You know, so it's like everything it's all in there, and I can search for it if I need to find it.
Absolutely.
It's right there. So it's in a place. And it used to be probably in a big binder.
Yeah.
It's probably still, I mean, like, again, like.
And we kept a paper binder of everything that was electronic too, just because it gives you the backup. So what would happen is computers would be down one day. Well, we have all the stuff still there. So we can still do the same thing the same way. And then, you know, the last piece of this is all about communication. So it's communicating these processes and allowing the opportunity for the conversation to flow back and forth. A great follow-up video that you should watch is our video on leadership and communication. It's a great one. And it would piggyback this really well in how you create good lines of communication, because these only work if well communicated. If sitting there and nobody knows where they are or how to get to them, or they're not, you know, or what their purpose is, and you create, and then someone does something, you're like, well, why didn't you go to the SOP for that? Well, okay, that's great. I didn't realize that even. How many times do we hear that? I didn't even know we had that, you know?
Oh, no, that's what happens. You get into a company. It's usually not like a massive company. It's usually like a mid-sized small business that's kind of been growing and evolving. And they've usually gone through a couple of phases of people.
Yes.
And now there's a miss at some point. These people transition to these people, transition to these people, and now there's a miss.
Yeah.
Someone didn't do that. It's like, oh, we have a freaking Google Drive with all of this written down. Like, this would have been useful like 2 years ago when I started. You know, like we didn't have this, or, you know, whatever it is, which is pretty interesting. I think of A Few Good Men. This is a military thing too.
I was just going to give a military example of this.
Yeah, A Few Good Men, when he's talking about, you know, is our code reds? Here's
Did
the
you order
freaking
the code red?
Is the code red in this manual for all the Marines?
Right.
He's like, show me the part in here where the code red is.
Right.
He's like, there is no part in there. Well, then they must not exist. I mean, then Tom Cruise does the and he says, show me where the mess hall is in the guide. He's like, it's not in there. He's like, well, how do you know how to go to the mess hall? How do you know where to eat? You mean you haven't been eating this whole time? It's like
it's brilliant.
Deep reference.
No, but I was going to give the same example. I wasn't going to reference the movie, but I was going to talk about the fact that, you know, the military does that so well. And I think that's where I picked up a lot of this is, all right, I want to implement that in my company, because everything just, you know, we would have these inspections and they would be every however many years. And you would spend a year putting together these continuity binders, and they were for this purpose, to ensure everyone did this thing the same way. And they, and maybe they got left on the shelf after the inspection, but they were there and they served a purpose. And, you know, you could go back to them and ensure. This is a good one.
Yeah, it's a good one. Always.
There's a worksheet. Download the worksheet. 3 blunt force facts for ensuring standard operating procedures in your business. Blunt force fact number 1 is a few minutes can save hundreds of hours. Blunt force fact number 2, flying blind leads to crashes. Don't crash and burn just because you don't have things outlined for your people. And blunt force fact number 3, systems are sustainability and sustainability are systems. Download the worksheet.
Yeah, we want sustainable growth for everybody. Make this part of do it early. Do it now. Don't wait.
Yeah, don't wait till it's, because if you get to the point where you're like, shit, I got to hire someone and you don't have it, now you got a big burden, a big lift.
Or just
on your
last
shoulders.
point for me is not just that. It's like, let's say you did something 3 months ago and you haven't done it in a while.
Right.
And you forget how to do it.
Yeah.
Why not just freaking have it written down?
That's it. Standard operating procedures. I'm Brian LaFauci.
Patrick Marino.
Till next time.
Thank you.